Good evening, DMV Daily. Yes, we're back for another edition of the DMV Daily Radio Show. I'm your host, Hassan Giordano, a.k.a. Mr. Politics, back in the building. Happy New Year. Absolutely. We're back for the new year and joined today by a political rock star from the Baltimore City Council. It's not often we get a white guy on the show either. So today is extra special to have my main man in the house. But before we get into the program, as always, I have to let you know that this program is brought to you by our fine sponsors, such as that stellar legal team known as the Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal dream team. So make sure you contact them today for your free consultation. 410-814-4600 is the number. Tell them the DMV Daily referred you, and they will give you a special discount. The show is also brought to you by those savvy political strategists at Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and have successfully gotten people elected to office since the 1970s with a man by the name of Art Murphy as their head. If you're thinking about running for office in 2020, make sure you give them a call today to get your campaign set up with user-friendly website, integrated social media sites, and a campaign plan to ensure success. They can be reached 240-242-7505 or on the web, www.politicomsolutions.com. And in the new year is in full swing, and so is DMV Daily Media, as we are set to launch all new podcast and live stream radio shows later this month, such as next week, the weekly Annapolis Report, which will be brought to you by your man, none other than Mr. Politics, launched every Monday as I break down all the inner workings of the 90-day legislative session set to begin next week on Wednesday, January 9th at 12 noon. So make sure to tune in each and every Monday to the DMVDaily.news to get the latest on the bills being introduced, committee hearings, dates and times, and the lowdown on all the smoke-filled backroom deals that take place down in Annapolis. You know me, I'm going to make sure that we put all that information out there. You can also hear a portion of that report every Tuesday morning from 7:15 to 7:30 a.m. on WORB 1010 a.m. You know I don't frequent in broadcasting or promoting any other station but DMV Daily. But every Tuesday from 7:15 to 7:30, I will give my Annapolis report on WORB as I enter my 5th year as the political reporter for the Larry Young Morning Show as well. We are also gearing up to launch the nationally syndicated legal podcast known as Law and Disorder with Ivan Bates Esquire, a weekly podcast you definitely don't want to miss. We'll delve into the 2020 elections with some people that I know that may be at the table today, with the podcast known as Political Palm with Mark and Hassan, as well as the Value My Vote 2020 is coming back. We started it in 2011. We're bringing it back in 2020. This will be a podcast as well as one-on-one video interviews with all the candidates running for office in 2020 as we sit down with each and every one of them to be able to bring you the news and information and their platforms that you want to hear straight to your tablet, your computer, and or your phone. So if you want to produce your own podcast, have it heard on the DMV Daily Podcast Network, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, and more, you want to hit us up today. 443-294-3900 is the number, or email us at info@dmvdaily.news. I can tell you like this. If you want a podcast, it's cheaper paying for a podcast once a week than it is paying your monthly cable bill. Let's put it that way. We are not other stations who are going to rob you blind and give you a CD at the end and tell you go about your business. Nobody can ever hear your show after that 1 hour program. And when you're done here, you'll be able to hear and see your program each and every week, each and every day, whether they saw it during that time or heard it during that time or feel like doing it at 11 o'clock at night when they get in the house, kick back and watch you on YouTube. So if you want to join in today's conversation, make sure you call in or text us your questions or comments to the studio phone line. 410-819-2370 is the number. 410-819-2370. Or if you're watching us on Facebook Live, as you always do, Joseph Kane, Shane, Brian, Andy, Darius, Teresa, Donovan, Zeke is even watching us. I wonder how you're doing that. Evan, they're all on there. I see y'all. Make sure that you ask your question or put your comment on there. You know we're always tuned in to the Facebook feed as well. Today, we are joined by that first-term councilman from the 1st Councilmatic District. He's the chair of the Council's Education Committee, and he seems to be all over the place. Councilman Zeke Cohen is in the building. What's happening, Cab?
Hey, Hassan.
What's that?
It's good to be with you, man, and it's an honor to be here. And just want to say I'm excited about what you guys are doing. I think it really fills a space that we need in this city in terms of getting the message out, what's happening in Annapolis, the political roundup that you all do. I think it's actually a public service, so I appreciate the work you're doing.
No, well, we appreciate you appreciating us, the work we're doing.
We appreciate the endorsement. Can we use that on air?
No.
That's going to be a soundbite.
No.
Oh, he said we can't use it. That was just for now. So you've been doing so much since you got elected a few years ago, which it's only been 2 years. But you've been certainly at the grind. Seems like 20 years since you've been in office. But lately I've been hearing about this Shop Local Challenge. Come to find out, I go online and find out you were behind it. So what is this Shop Local Challenge for those who may not know, and how can people get more engaged in it?
Yeah, so it is no question that Baltimore has some of the most creative, innovative, intelligent entrepreneurs in the entire world. And to survive and thrive in this city, you've got to have hustle, right? You've got to be able to work hard. You've got to be creative. And I know in representing a district that has a lot of wonderful local small businesses, restaurants, bookstores, places to go shopping for the holidays, that those are the types of folks that make our city so charming, and that we as citizens have an obligation to support them, right? It is no question that our local businesses or small businesses have struggled in the last couple of years. I think it's a combination of factors. Partly it's the perception and the reality of violence in our city has decreased tourism from the suburbs. There's also the reality that people are shopping online and that people aren't going as frequently into the neighborhood bookstore or going to purchase their gifts for Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa in the neighborhood store. And so we started the Shop Local Challenge in this really honest moment I had with a small business owner in my district where she said, Zeke, I'm really suffering. And I don't know if I can make it through this holiday season. And I know I'm not alone here. And I'd heard that from a lot of folks. And so I said, look, what is it that we can do to support you right now? Because I don't want to wait till next season. I don't want to wait till next year. What can we do to get you through this season? And I should say, this is someone that when I asked her to step up and hire a young person, she was the first to come to the plate. So it's not just someone who's complaining or bashing the city. This is someone who has lived here, who has put her work and sweat equity into the city, who hires local, who hires young people from city schools. And so I felt obligated to her and to all the folks just like her. And so it's really simple. The Shop Local Challenge is about promoting wonderful, small, locally owned businesses in our city. And all it is you buy something, you get to know the person who sold it to you, you tell their story a little bit, and then you hashtag it and put it online. And what I've seen since launching this thing a few weeks ago, you mentioned you've seen it around, is people have just picked it up. It's had this organic effect where all of a sudden we're seeing it in our neighborhood pages. We're seeing restaurants get promoted that weren't being promoted as well. We're seeing businesses that folks hadn't heard of all of a sudden are getting more traffic. And for me, fundamentally, what it's about is we need to be stewards of our own city. We need to promote what's already great here. We don't have to constantly chase a marketing campaign or telling the narrative or trying to lure someone to come here. We've already got greatness in Baltimore, and that's what the Shop Local Challenge is about.
Wow. See, that would have never crossed my mind. I mean, thinking about that, but that's true. The local people, we need, hey, I mean, I know it's a challenge with us down here. Now, mind you, Harris Jones, that's our renters, our landlords, they ain't struggling by a long shot, but they were a small business. I guess they still are, technically. I mean, they do great work as well, especially in lobbying. But like you were saying, when you came in here, it's a whole block here of people who are activists, builds right down the street.
That's right.
The minority contractors right upstairs, and there's a lot. Terra Cafe's right around the corner.
Amazing restaurant. And that whole thing down there, Terra Cafe, and then there's a juice bar, there's all the different barber shops. I mean, that's who we have to support, and it's one thing to be a council person and pass legislation and everything else, but I also think that part of this job is living the values that we preach. And when we say we're going to support local businesses, we got to live that out. We got to do that. Ivan was at an event we held a couple weeks ago at the Great Germanos in Little Italy.
Where aren't you at? Everybody comes on the show that Ivan was there.
Yeah, I was there.
I was nice and quiet. Breeze in, check it out. Had great food.
Yeah,
great food.
That's what I'm saying.
I'd never been to that restaurant before, but I went home and I told my wife about it, and so we definitely will be hitting that restaurant again.
Yeah, and there's so many Germanos, and that place, I'll tell you, it has a rich history. I know a little later on we might be talking about the current House Speaker. Well, guess what? They've got this beautiful portrait of Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi and Tommy, her father, and Tommy, her brother, and it's right there, and it's an original portrait. And apparently, they were telling me she was actually in there about 2 weeks ago showing some people this portrait, but it's part of that rich Baltimore history. And when you go there, you can just feel it. I mean, the food is incredible. And the atmosphere, the vibe. There was a guy, Billy Colucci. He's a local Fells Pointer. He was playing jazz. It's just an exceptional, amazing place, and that is what we need to invest
what's the name
in.
of it?
Germanos.
Where's it at?
It's in Little Italy, right on High Street.
Yep. Right there in the corner. I think it's across from Chiparelli's.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it was very, very good. I've been to Chiparelli, some of the other spots, but I'd never been to that one. It was really good. That was some banging lasagna.
Oh, they can make lasagna.
Oh yeah, it was good.
It was for the love of lasagna. That was the event.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I gotta give them a shout out because they do Uber Eats, and I pick up from there all the time. The food smells delicious. So.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
it is
right.
good.
And then when you get done, you can go right to Vacaros and get yourself a cannoli.
I did that.
Did you?
I went straight to Vacaros and I would have my tiramisu.
Yep.
I was gluttony that night.
My girl Gina's still down there. You know Gina?
Gina, pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, she's done. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Gina's great.
All right. So, get into all that. I want to know, because you talked about this getting, what interests me is you were talking about the business you were talking about and talking about hiring young people. And that's how I got to know you.
That's right.
I said this last week on the show, that before all the politics, you were the director of Intersection.
Yes.
And now, of course, chair of the education. So youth kind of has always been your passion. And then coming into the council was kind of no surprise. You began this youth summer jobs with Councilman Burnett.
That's right.
But you also passed a resolution extending the city's youth works program.
That's right.
And I want to know how that's going to even work, because I know there's a lot of young people who even applied who weren't able to get the summer job. Right. And how do we extend that beyond just the summer?
No, that's absolutely right. So we had 12,000 people apply last year for Youth Works, and only 8,000 of them were able to get a job. And what I would simply say is that if we're going to be serious in this city about investing in our young people and a real strategy, not just a one-off program, but a strategy to support youth and create opportunities for them to be safe, to be working, to be productive, to be learning, this is exactly the type of investment that we should make. It is unacceptable that 4,000 kids didn't get jobs. And to me, the 8,000 kids that did get jobs, we should be working on strengthening that program. Like you mentioned, Hassan, Councilman Burnett and I, a few years ago, when we got on council, we started this program called This Is Working. And small pilot, we had 30 young people and a bunch of local small businesses that took them on. And we had a site supervisor who would work between the business and the young person and make sure their needs were taken care of. So when Johnny's got an issue with transportation, she would help figure out the bus pass. When Billy has a problem at home, she would help manage that. And so what we found is that both for the young people and the businesses, it was a win-win. Because a lot of businesses, you ask them to hire a young person, they don't really know how to do that. I mean, they're not educators. They're not, I used to be a teacher. They didn't used to teach. They know how to run a business. And so they don't have time to be teaching and working with our young people. And so the program that we created specifically supported the needs of these 30 young people. And the other thing that it did was that every Friday they would meet at an industry site, because we know that Baltimore's economy is moving. The 21st century economy is going to be about tech and obviously eds and meds. We are a huge hub, but development, so many of our young people, when I used to teach, they would see these cranes up in the sky, but they don't know what they're doing. And they don't know what all this development means. And so on one Friday, we brought our young folks to Brewers Hill in my district to see from sort of nuts to bolts what a development site looked like. And we had the developer come out and walk them through what it means to lay out these plans and have this vision and take what was essentially an old industrial site and turn it into houses and apartments and retail and shopping. And so the purpose of the program was about not only the young people having a paycheck and a place to go that was safe and the support of a wonderful educator who's looking after them, but also to really learn about the careers of the future. And it worked. We've done it 2 years in a row. We've only had one negative experience. Every other young person, every other business owner has not only said, this is great, but I will get my friends and my colleagues to hire as well. So I believe in it fundamentally. And what we said a couple weeks ago in council is that we need to take what we have with YouthWorks and expand it to year round. Because that is what I hear again and again and again from these young people is, I want a job, I want a paycheck. We know there are other needs that we're going to have to attend to, but we should start there. And that's I'm really proud and appreciate all of my colleagues for supporting that resolution. And we are working really hard to make sure it gets implemented.
The late, great Frank Conaway Sr. used to say all the time that the solution to Baltimore's crime issue is jobs, jobs, jobs. That was his main key, idea, so.
And Neil Franklin says on Facebook, we have all we need in Baltimore, quoting you. He likes that. He said that all we need is to promote and support our local businesses and talent right here in Baltimore.
That's right.
It's interesting you say that. So actually today I went to go visit a 17-year-old kid from Baltimore City that was sitting in jail in Towson. This kid is praying that the judge gives him 15 years for a string of carjackings. And so it's my law partner's client, but I wanted to see him, make sure he's okay, see where his head was at. And we talked. And I asked him, I said, look, what made you do that?
Right.
Look at you. What made you do that? And he said, I wanted things that my mother couldn't give me. And I wanted a job, and I just couldn't find a job. Nobody would hire me. I said, well, what did you do? He said, everybody kept saying, come back later, come back later. He said, then I got caught up with the wrong crowd, and I just went buck wild. And so I really want to commend you for that. I'm a big believer that if you really are serious about public safety, you have to give people an opportunity of hope, jobs. With the young group, with the young kids, they do want to have jobs. My fear is that sometimes they get so focused on that job right away, they also lose focus in terms of the school. But I think that with your program, they definitely will be able to have a taste of both. because there is so much talent. The other thing I would like to ask you, have you tried to reach out to the GBC to see if they may be able to try to partner? Because one of the things that we always look at, we talk to the GBC, they're giving us input on the crime and all those other things. And they've done a lot of great things and good things for the city. But when you have the businesses, you have the money, have you ever given the consideration, I'm sure you have, to partner with them to maybe put together a fund? Because there could be money that they may be able to put together in a fund, and some of these kids can now have jobs at businesses that couldn't afford them but want to have them.
Yeah. So we've had a bunch of conversations with Mr. Fry over at GBC and some of his members as well. And I think that's a really good point in engaging our business community, not just our small businesses, but our medium and large ones as well. I think there is a lot of interest. I also think there's some fear and apprehension on the part of businesses. What I hear a lot is, I want to hire young people, but I'm just afraid that they're going to come in, they're not going to be skilled, they're not going to be able to show up on time. And what I say to folks is, look, I understand that. I used to teach teenagers, they can be a rough crowd, but I need you to make this investment, because unless you do so, we'll never know. Yeah. And what the piece of trust that I need you to instill in me is, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to have this coordinator who's going to be the liaison, who's going to be the in-between. We know from, Job Opportunity Task Force to Build's Turnaround Tuesdays to any of these programs that people, especially young people, especially adolescents, need that support. And so I'm not just going to leave you out on a ledge. We're not just going to say, here's a 14-year-old who's had some challenges. Good luck. Go mentor them. We're going to be there every step of the way. And I think that's what our business community is looking for. There needs to be trust. It needs to be a partnership. This is where public-private makes a ton of sense. And it's got to be a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah, because the reason I was asking you about, having, say, a fund, because there are one of the other issues I hear of a lot of young kids is that some of the jobs, they can't get the transportation. Mm-hmm. But, some of the businesses in their communities, they don't have the money to hire those kids. Right. And so for me, I feel like, if you were able to partner with GBC and get a company to write you $100,000-$200,000 checks, to have the money already there, then one, they get the tax write-off, but they also allow the kids to be able to have the jobs in the communities and the stores next to them, and they're locally there. Maybe, that then they have an understanding and a feel, because sometimes, unfortunately, when you sit down and look at the crime that we have, a lot of the local stores will be robbed. Mm-hmm. But then if a kid who they know from the neighborhood works there, then a lot of time the kids who may think about going in that store was like, nah, they gave my man Johnny a job. That's right. So, we don't even look like that, because then they know the owners. And I just feel like the program that you're really putting together for kids is doing an awful lot. I hear about it from the kids. And I really am glad to see that you want to expand, and you're really doing what you need to do it. So I really want to commend you with that.
I appreciate that. And I think you put your finger on a critical piece, Ivan, which is transportation is an enormous challenge in the city of Baltimore. It can take young people an hour and a half to get to school in the morning. Yeah. And we know that anything more than 40 minutes of transit to school causes academic problems. I've heard kids say, I got 3 transfers. The bus sometimes leaves me behind. I live in Northwest Baltimore. I go to Digital Harbor or Patterson High School on the east side, and it's like going to school in another state. I mean, these kids are hustling and trying to get there. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a really interesting idea about trying to get some support for transportation, because one thing I know is if you can't get to the job, you ain't going to be working at the job. Exactly. I mean, that's the quickest thing all these employers will tell you is if you don't show up, you're not, I ain't giving you a paycheck.
Well, speaking of the schools, yep. All right, you're chair of education, and we're talking about a 21st century school plan that Baltimore supposedly has. We're building all these new schools, but we're closing a lot of pivotal schools down that are pissing off a lot of people, that are forcing, in some cases, these students to travel from west to east or from neighborhood to neighborhood, that are beefing amongst each other. So it's forcing this transportation issue. How do we solve this problem in Baltimore, especially given the fact that, look, the state isn't going to give but so much money, right? And we keep giving 11 to 13, maybe 15% at most to our kids, when public safety continues to be 45 to 50% of the budget.
Right.
So how do we change that?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally this is about our values and our priorities. And a budget is a moral document. And part of why I voted against the last budget was that we didn't do enough for our young people, particularly our schools, from the city of Baltimore. I think it's tough to make the case every year in Annapolis that we need more from the state when we as a city also have to step up. That being said, I will say that since Governor O'Malley, we have underfunded the state of Maryland with a constitutional obligation to give every child in the state a adequate education, has underfunded our schools by $290 million per year. And we should repeat that every time we're on the radio or we're on the TV. And I was very disappointed that we're going to spend another year waiting for the Kerwin report to be produced in Annapolis, because I'll simply say that our kids can't wait. They need this education now. That we can't lose another generation of children to these streets. We need to prepare them for the 21st century economy. So I'm really disappointed. You speak about the issue around school closures, and it is incredibly challenging and just viscerally, emotionally heart-wrenching thing. And I know this because I taught in a community where the school closed. And it was Sandtown, Winchester, the heart of the uprising. After my first year teaching, the school I was in was George G. Kelson, and it was taken over by another school, William Pinderhughes. And then there was the whole thing around closing that school as well. And when you do that in a community that has historically been disinvested, underserved, marginalized, and frankly just treated like garbage in so many ways, lied to so many times, I think it sends a very profound message, which is that this community isn't worth it. And I think people internalize that. And look, I understand we have to be data driven. We have to have the right amount of students and seats for our young people. We're a city that used to be almost 1 million people. We're now down to 600,000 plus. So the reality is that some schools do have to close. We have to completely modernize our buildings. Kids should not be going to schools that look like jails, and that costs a lot of money. But I think that the way Baltimore and a lot of cities, Chicago as well, has traditionally done school closures, I think is sometimes perceived as very insulting, particularly to people of color, particularly to the most ignored communities, because it's seen as something that is done to us, not for us, and certainly not with us. And so in my conversations with Dr. Sanalices and her team, what I've really encouraged them to do is to be honest, be transparent, engage with community, talk to parents and young people, and just be honest with them. Do it in a way that preserves and respects people's dignity and humanity. Don't just come in and say, all right, next week we're closing these 3 schools. After that, we're going to close this school. And we've got some algorithm that's going to tell you why we're doing it. People don't respect that. That's not real leadership. Real leadership is having a conversation. It's bringing in the community and letting them be part of the discussion.
But do we have real leadership at the school system? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's just shuffling the chairs. Santalitas, okay, she was there prior, right? the lady Cohen, she was there through 3 or 4 different administrations. So it's not like there's no any real change, and people are fed up to keep seeing year after year. Erica Green did a wonderful job in the Baltimore Sun of continuously exposing millions of dollars being wasted. And so parents are at this point, you're closing schools that help black children, like the one Carl Stokes and them had. And so people are starting to say, you know what? And you can't blame it on the state, because the state has continuously funded Baltimore City schools more than almost every school in this city. I mean, in the state.
But not as much as their own formula says that they should. And we should be clear about that. Look, I have enormous respect for Dr. Sonia Stanalises. I think she is really a brilliant person who has vision, who has poise. I will say that I was not impressed by her predecessor, Mr. Thornton, who came here and I think actually set our school system back. But look, what she needs to balance is the incredible urgency of now, because we can't afford another year or a generation of kids to get lost, with the idea that we really do need some big structural changes within that school system. The money needs to, we keep saying this, the money needs to follow the kids. We can't have North Ave as this bureaucracy where it feels like there's all these administrators over there, but not in our school buildings. The money needs to follow the kids. And I'll just say that, having taught in a school where I taught in 2 schools, in one of them we had almost 40 kids in a classroom, which is not sustainable. We didn't have heat. We didn't have air conditioning. We didn't have drinkable running water. We had students that were persistently poisoned by lead in Sandtown. We had kids that were experiencing housing instability, an enormous amount of trauma from the violence that they had experienced. These are the conversations that we as a city need to have. I've been participating in the task force that the school teachers union set up around violence after a couple of teachers and administrators and cafeteria folks were pretty brutally assaulted. And the thing that keeps coming up that I keep hearing is this crisis that our young people have around violence and around trauma, just this very real mental health crisis that our kids are experiencing. And look, if you, and Ivan knows this better than anyone, but if you go home and you witness your dad being shot or your mom being hurt or people experiencing violence, how do you not internalize that? How do you not take that with you into the classroom? How do you not react in some kind of way? And so, one thing that I've stressed pretty frequently to Dr. Stanalises is, until we grapple with the very real social and emotional experiences of our young people, it is going to be very hard to move the needle on literacy and math and all these other things. We've got to get honest about that.
Absolutely. So I do have a question coming from a constituent. So I got constituents too. It's just not in the first district. But so they asked me when they knew that a councilman was going to be on, that they are a senior that is now kind of suffering because they were let go of their job after almost 30 years, right before retirement age. So they got like partial retirement, kind of really living hand to foot, and then they own their own house, but the roof started leaking and it's becoming a danger because I think it caused a hole in the ceiling or something like that. And so she was asking, was there any local things that the city did or even the state that helped with seniors when it came to home ownership, not home ownership, but helping fix the housing for seniors?
Yeah, so we've done a lot in the first district just in terms of infrastructure with seniors. We have a couple of senior centers, and I'll never forget one of my first months on council, some folks from the senior center reached out and said the door is persistently broken. And, it seems like a small thing, except to them, it means the world, because that's their senior center. That's the place they go and they relate to each other, and they.
This is her house, though.
Right.
Okay.
I'm gonna get there.
Oh, okay.
And so we were like, all right, well, let's get this door fixed. And the amount of bureaucracy and dealing with multiple agencies and dealing with angering the building administrator because we made this call. It was wild, but we have got to support our senior citizens. They are the life's blood of this city. And in the same way that we got to nurture and uplift the young people, we got to be there for seniors. In terms of your constituent, I would love to follow up with her. If you could give me her contact information, and I will definitely get her connected, do some case management, see what we can do about her roof, because we can't have a senior citizen that's living in that kind of condition.
Right. Anything coming in. Yeah, is he on there? Where's he at?
Yeah, Mark's on the line. Hold on, let me bring Mark in. Mr. Union Boss, you there, sir? Mark.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Where you at, man?
Good afternoon, stuck in traffic.
No. I told you I was stuck in Rockville.
Yeah, he over there.
Go do Rockville.
He over there, Dominican Republican, bathing some damn
right.
way.
Well, if I was, I wouldn't be talking to y'all at all. Hello, Councilman.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm good. It's physically painful not to be there with you today. I was so excited you coming in, but I got caught up in Rockville today, so I apologize that I'm not there. But I'm really enjoying the very rich and full conversation you guys are having.
Thanks, man. We miss you over here in Baltimore. You should come back soon.
Yeah, I'll be back tonight.
All right.
So I had a couple of I wanted to get your perspective, and I know we've been talking about a lot of the initiatives that you've taken up in the short 2 years that you were there, that you have been in the city. But I think most folks recognize that you've been a leader, especially on education issues, long before you ran for the council. Part of the reason why you were elected to the council, I think. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this whole police commissioner thing, and get your perspective on. I guess we just had an announcement in the last hour or so that unfortunately the commissioner designee has some family issues, so he won't be in Baltimore for any of the forums that were planned. But yet the council appears to be going ahead with a Saturday session, an all-day Saturday session, where the public, I guess, is supposed to talk to the council about their questions about the commissioner, but the public hasn't had a chance to hear from the commissioner yet. So I'm not sure what people are supposed to come to the council and tell you guys on Saturday. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. So, let me begin by expressing my condolences and our support for Commissioner Fitzgerald and his son. From what I understand, there's a pretty serious medical challenge, and so he's going to have to stay in Texas. So I just, I want him to know that we're praying for him and his son. That being said, I've been really disappointed with this process. I think that we're at an absolutely pivotal moment for our city. We have got to get this right. There is nothing more important than public safety, and the process so far has not met the standards of the greatest city on earth, as far as I'm concerned. And look, what I've laid out is two things, and I know several of my colleagues are there as well. One is that we wanted to see his full background file. And look, I don't need to see anything about his wife or his kids, but at the very least, it would be nice to know he paid his taxes. It would be nice to see. I know there's been some lawsuits against the city of Fort Worth while he was police commissioner. I'd like to know some more about that. I wanted to do a really deep dive because we're literally watching our former police commissioner get taken out in handcuffs for not only failing to pay his taxes, but lying on his taxes. And so the trust just isn't there. We are experiencing both a crisis of public safety, but also a crisis of confidence. People just don't believe it right now. They don't have faith. And when you say we're going to do a robust, transparent, community-based search, I expect that you're going to deliver on those things. And I think we've fallen, the administration has fallen short on those commitments. So it was the background file. They gave us a 12-page, heavily redacted file that did not meet my standard. And then the other thing was, I want to see community engagement across the city in all 9 police districts. Mr. Fitzgerald or whoever wants to be our next commissioner should be out there talking to the people that he's going to serve. He should be in churches, in basements, in synagogues, in businesses, in street corners. He should be talking to the officers that he's going to lead. I've heard concerns from just officers here about not knowing much about this person. So that's what we ask for is I want to see him out there. I want to see him engaged in all 9 police districts and to offer 2 very short community meetings in Northeast Baltimore and then in Northwest Baltimore, just to me didn't cut it.
Are y'all set to, because some people are in the impression that you're set, the council is set to vote on his nomination Monday, but I don't think that's the case, is it?
From what I understand, based on the recent development of him needing to stay in Texas, I do believe that that's going to be delayed. I do think that there was a plan where the Executive Appointments Committee, we have a hearing on Saturday, and then we were going to potentially vote. The committee was going to vote on Monday, but I suspect we're going to push that back because, and again, I'll just say for me, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but to vote before he's even come and engaged with anyone aside from the council members and some of the media is just totally unacceptable.
Hold on. So they were going to do 2 short bull crap, to be quite honest, meet and greets on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. The day before y'all were going to vote to approve this guy.
Well, that is what was laid out.
That's the extent.
That is what was laid out. And again, I would just say that does not meet the standard of where I think we need to be as a city. We need to hold ourselves to higher expectations than that. That is not enough community engagement. That is not transparency. And so again, I've said this. I said this on Facebook today. I just think that we have got to get serious about. We got to take the public more seriously in this city. We can't think that people are okay with just an hour and a half here, an hour and a half there, and then let's rush this thing through. So I am very, very, very concerned about how this process has been unrolled.
What would you say to the article that was released today by the Baltimore Sun that said the police commissioner nominee's resume overstates accomplishments on violent crime drop and body cameras? I mean, what would you say, to someone that may have kind of fudged his resume or may have overshown his accomplishments?
Yeah, so again, it's disappointing. We're looking for real transparency. And, I sat about as far as I'm sitting from you, Hassan, with Mr. Joel Fitzgerald. He came to my office. We had a really nice conversation. And then I said to him, look, this is not personal. I don't know you, but I need to see your background file. Because the previous day I'd spoken to the mayor's office, the administration, I'd spoken to Mr. Andre Davis, the city solicitor, and Mr. Davis said, I can't give you that file, but you can ask the nominee and he can release it. And so I sat with him and I said, Mr. Fitzgerald, this is not a shot at you and I'm not trying to do gotcha. But this is the moment that we're in as a city. I'm going to need to see your full background file. And instead of saying, no problem, Councilman, I got you, what he said is, you can go FOIA that. To me, that's not good enough. And so reading this morning that he may have embellished some of the resume that he presented, again, was another disappointment.
And for those listening who don't know what FOIA is, Freedom of Information request. Yep. So, but that's very disappointing. So and I know you can't speak for your colleagues, but gut hunch, if y'all were to vote Monday with what's going on right now, would he pass?
Honestly, Hassan, I don't know. I think there are some very real concerns that members have. I think even on the Executive Appointments Committee, and I certainly don't portend to speak for any of my colleagues, but I think even on that committee, there's some concerns. So I don't know whether this gentleman would have the 8 votes to get through. Again, it's just a moment for we need the best of the best of the best here in Baltimore. And I say that for our police commissioner. I say that for we have a health commissioner vacancy right now.
Yeah. And technically a school board, because Sandalisa has never really been necessarily appointed. I mean, she's still considered really the interim, correct?
Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We need a head. The HR department.
Tony Barksdale. And health commissioner, the brother, he ran 43rd district. What's his name? Long
No,
name.
you mean Dr. Richard Bruno in 41.
No, I don't mean him. I mean the guy who ran.
Oh, the guy from Healthcare for the Homeless.
Right.
Yeah.
What's his name? He gonna kill me that I forgot his name.
I see his face. He was there.
Nilesh.
Yeah,
Nilesh.
he was there when we did a
Nilesh.
meeting up there in that district. Remember, we did a meeting and he was there.
Yep,
he
Dr.
spoke.
Nilesh.
Look,
yeah.
whoever it is, we need the best of the best. And that doesn't, by the way, mean we need someone from New York or from D.C.
Why not the best of the best here? And have you had a chance to read the 216-page investigative report?
So I have read as much of it as I can read. It's been my bedtime reading. After I put my daughter to sleep, I go read that report. I mean, look, that's what I'm saying. We started this show talking about the Shop Local Talent Challenge. Baltimore is filled with talent, especially when it comes to healthcare and the medical field. I mean, we have brilliant people, Nilesh, Dr. Bruno, all these folks are
Dr. Tyrone Powers.
absolutely. And we've had great health commissioners in this city. The last one being Dr. Wen, who's a national rock star and is going to do amazing work. And let me say, women's health, Planned Parenthood is very, very, very lucky to have her because she is an incredible leader. But that is the level of talent that we need in our city right now, filling these agencies. There is no reason why Baltimore shouldn't be one of these cities that everyone's talking about, like New Orleans or Detroit or any of these places that are having a comeback, that are having a renaissance, that are having a real moment. Young people want to be in cities, especially great cities. Our proximity to DC and New York and Philly. We're right on the eastern seaboard. We've got, the Chesapeake. We've got all these amazing universities, our incredible art scene, our music scene, our restaurants. I mean, the food scene here is off the hook. Why isn't this the moment for Baltimore to be the great American comeback story? And again, to take it back to Mr. Fitzgerald and this police commissioner search, I just don't think we've reached that standard.
Well, Dan Sparaco on Facebook asked straight out, will you vote to confirm this police commissioner if the vote was held?
Yeah, so look, let me say this, and I've said this a couple of times. My basic standard is I need the full background file, and I need to see real, robust engagement by this candidate for me to even consider voting for him. And so between now and whenever, because it's unclear when he is actually going to come back to Baltimore, if those things happen, if I see a true leader emerge in the way that he's engaging with people, in the way that he's talking to council members, then we'll see. But I will say that is a very high bar, and right now I'm not there.
Today your answer would be no.
No, right.
Correct.
Well, deferring back, I'm sorry, to the 216-page report. Why did it sound like Baltimore City doesn't know how to police its own communities and is looking for the Superman?
Let me ask
Why
you
does
this.
it
When you look at that report?
Yeah, I read it. I read the whole thing. I'm actually in
To
the
me,
process of doing a
funny
report
part to me,
for
that was
DMV Daily.
absolutely. I was extremely disappointed in the members of the city council that participated in that charade.
I thought the question sounded
Because
questions as desperation.
But the problem is, why are you playing that game?
Yeah.
Why are we spending taxpayer money to go down there to talk to people who obviously want this commissioner designate to be approved? They set all that up. There were things that I had really wanted to see real leadership come from out of that committee that didn't happen. Why didn't they go on their own accord? If you're going to be down there, why don't you sit down and go to a church unannounced to sit down and say, look, I'd like to go ahead and sit down and talk to 20 members at the end of service, Pastor. And the pastor would have done that. There's so many other things that I wanted to see. I was extremely disappointed to have not seen that. I constantly say time and time again, I just want to see politicians stop playing politics and really begin to be public servants. And that's not what that report said to me. That report said to me that everybody's playing politics. We forgot about the people. And you said a lot when you talked about Baltimore does have all those great things that you mentioned. The harbor, the communities, the proximity. But Baltimore just, unfortunately, when I look at it, you constantly look at the crime. You constantly look at being judged by that. We already have the stigma, quote unquote, of the wire. You already have those stigma of all those things right there. This police commissioner to be named is truly one of the most important positions and the most important job and duty that many people will say this mayor will ever have.
Yeah. Let me just push back on that a little bit, though. Right. So I do think that. And I was not on that trip to Texas.
You should have been.
My brother lives in Texas right now. He's in Austin.
Because I know you would have asked better questions than what I saw.
Well, but you got to give them a break.
Yeah,
though. I mean,
hang on. They did. I want to say a lot of interviews. I thought it was smart for them to have that court reporter there so that there was a
that
clear.
They decided to hire at the last minute. The council decided to do, and it's
So that
only
there was
200 and some pages, like you said, outside. It wasn't fudged by one of them putting it together.
Right.
Yeah.
And a court reporter, it's only long because a court reporter does the way they do their shorthand.
Yeah.
It makes it, if you put all that together, it's probably about 60 to 70 pages, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So look, I got to say, in defense of my colleagues, I don't think any other city council has done that.
Ever.
Has gone to a place and done some really serious, you can disagree with their questions. Maybe they should have shown up at a church basement. But, when I read that report, it reflects some honest questioning. It does seem to want to get to the bottom of who this guy is. And what I also appreciate about this report, and again, I understand very strongly the disappointment with this whole process, but what I will give credit to my colleagues for is that they did not just seek out Joel Fitzgerald fans. They spoke to some people that were harshly critical of his tenure, and that is reflected as well in that report. So again, Ivan, I think this entire process has left you, me, and just about everyone I talked to with a ton of frustration. But I do want to say to my colleagues that went down there, I at least appreciated what they were able to produce.
I do commend them for that.
Even some of them feel like they sounded like they weren't so much fans as, remember how Martin O'Malley was going to become governor? They're like, oh yeah, he's a great guy. Just get him the hell out of Baltimore. That's kind of how they sounded from this guy down in Texas.
One of the questions
Go ahead and take him so we can
the
get rid
questions
of
I
him.
really want to see is this. Do you know if any of your colleagues have gone up to Reading, Pennsylvania? And Reading and Philadelphia, to me, are the two most important locations. Why? I want to know what the crime numbers were before he got there, while he was there, and I want to know what the crime numbers look after he left.
Yeah.
We're also so concerned about big city policing.
Right.
Where was he in Philadelphia? What was his job? And who are the officers that worked for him? Because he's been gone so long that people aren't going to sit down and they're going to try to remember the best, but they'll also remember the worst, and they'll give us a true sense of who this individual is. See, that's what I want to really see for me. Because my personal feeling was, okay, you may have went down there with great intentions to do A, B, C, and D, but let's be honest. I kind of felt that they kind of set it up to say, well, we got to interview these people. What I kept realizing was he had one or two great supporters that were always like, oh, no, he's great here. Oh, no, he's great there. And so I felt like, could they really be themselves? Where if you go over here with no one looking, no one paying attention, go to Reading, look at the statistics, let's look at the crime numbers. Yeah. If he was a major, say, in Northeast District up in Philly or in West Philadelphia, let's look at the crime numbers before he was there, why he was there, and when he left, because statistics and those numbers, they're not going to lie in that regard. Right. And that's where I feel like I understand what they were attempting to do. Yeah. However, I feel based on the politics, they probably weren't able to do really what they wanted to do. And that's why I'm saying, okay, let's figure this out another way. Let's look at Reading. Let's look at Philadelphia. Let's look at those statistics. Because then I don't care what anybody has to say. The number's right there.
Yeah, those are the cities that I really wanted to see more because, again, the demographics is totally different in Fort Worth. 19%, African-American population versus 62% here. They have more Hispanics and more whites in Fort Worth than anything. So it's a different style of policing, different neighborhoods that they're dealing with, and they're only dealing with the small majority of African Americans. Another thing is unemployment is totally different there. They've had some of the lowest unemployment rates, like less than 3% in Fort Worth, Texas, versus we have communities in our neighborhoods that, we know are over 20% unemployment rate for African Americans. So there's a total different dynamics in Fort Worth. And I think that Philadelphia would be more of a comparison to our city, having a more larger black population, having some of the old industrial issues that, as far as employment.
And you can see if he was engaged in his community, because by not being from here, I don't want you to hide to say, oh, I'm not from there. If you were in Philadelphia and you were engaged in, say, a boxing club and the community knew you in Philadelphia, that tells me, you know what? This police commissioner designate most likely will be engaged, or he or she understands the importance. And I agree with you. If you're not engaged in the community, then you don't have a snowball's chance, and of being able to be successful, especially in Baltimore.
That's right.
So for me, I'm extremely disappointed. I vented a little bit. I don't really vent too much on the show per se. But when it comes
got
to
that vein popping out. Got that vein popping out.
The criminal justice issues, I was disappointed because I would have liked to have someone to say, oh, why don't we talk? I expected a little bit more, but I understand your point of view. I wasn't looking at it from that point of view, but I get it. I see it. So no, I do want to commend them for doing more than other people have done in the past. And I do think, based on what they had to work with, they were able to do the best at that moment in time with what they had to work with.
Yep. And if you were mayor, right, I'm going to get to you in a couple minutes, but if you were mayor, would you have chosen somebody from within the ranks of Baltimore, or would you have went out on a national search?
Yeah, look, I think
I heard you, Mark. Yes, we are Baltimore brand. We're proud of Baltimoreans. Yeah. So cut it out, Mr. Outsider. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the Twitterati go back and forth a whole bunch on that very question of, do you bring someone from the outside? Do we nurture homegrown talent? Look, I will say that my own bias is Baltimore, and promoting from within. I think it sends a really strong message when we say to our officers coming up that you can have a career here, and you can rise through the ranks, and you can become a leader, and you can lead this department. And we're not just constantly searching for the next shiny coin out of California or wherever.
Or some rusty penny from New York.
I mean, no disrespect to New York, but
I'm from New York. I'm born and bred, so I'm really, considered.
So you know about rusty pennies,
right? So I know about them rusty pennies.
Yep. But look. That being said, to be fair, we know that this department has enormous challenges. That it is structurally. It's not there. I mean, there's a reason why we're under a consent decree. There's a reason why violence remains out of control. And while that is not all on the police, I want to be really clear that I'm not someone who believes that police alone can solve all of our cities or our society's problems. we have a real problem within that department. And so I think seeing what happened with Mr. D'Souza really sent some shockwaves through the administration, and I think they decided to go with someone from the outside. But I will say, I still think that within the department, for all the challenges that it has, for all the really deep structural issues with the, frankly, institutionalized racism that the DOJ report points to, there are still some very brave women and men within BPD. And it would be nice it would be right to give one of them an opportunity to lead. And there's a whole bunch of names that come up whenever you have this conversation.
Even a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some incredibly talented women. I got to shout out my major from the Southeast, Major Brown, who is understaffed, who's dealing with some very high robbery rates, who's dealing with a whole bunch of very serious crime, but who is coming to work every single day, putting her people out there. She's leading by example. She's not sitting behind the desk. She's out there on the streets. I'm actually going to be with her tonight when I leave this show to go do a community cop walk in Greektown and say to folks that...
Yeah, you had a couple robberies there.
We sure did. Yeah, some really serious robberies.
Yeah.
Shane Bryant actually, he talked about this on asking you on Facebook that in Northeast, he points out they don't have a commander, and he wants to know what can you do. Speaking of your district and others, how can we get your thoughts on creating stability in various leadership positions in the city, especially command staff in the district?
Yeah, and Shane is absolutely right. You can't lead a district without a commander there. It's simple. It's like you couldn't have a functional school without a great principal. Right? I mean, it's the same basic
Can't have a
concept.
city without a great mayor.
Hey, well,
so the rumor is that in the next year or next 6 months, because look, face it, you raised over $200,000 in your first council district race, right? I know what it said on the books, but I know you didn't raise way over $200,000, and that's no. I don't think any other district raised that amount of money, right? You're only one term in, but people are talking about you, speculating citywide. Will you run for mayor? Will you run for council president? Are you willing to make that decision and make that call?
So, look, let me say this. I'm incredibly honored that folks are even saying that about me. I love this city. This is the only place I want to raise my daughter. And we have some very real challenges in Baltimore right now. Last year, 2018, 309 homicides. Probably, we don't have the numbers yet, but over 900 deaths from overdose. Mm-hmm. Generations of kids that are graduating from our school system and struggling to read, to do basic math, to be part of that 21st century economy. The challenges in this city are very, very, very real. And look, for me, I think fundamentally my focus right now is on a few things. One is I truly believe that having more of our young people working, producing, out there, feeling like they're part of this city is a critical component. I truly believe that we've got to rebuild faith among the public, that we can function as a city government, just the basic democracy 101. And this is not unique to Baltimore. I think this is a national crisis around what it means to be a citizen, what it means to feel connected to your community. And so I'm really proud that last year we passed the Transparency in Lobbying Act, one of the nation's foremost transparency laws. I mean, it really puts Baltimore on the forefront of transparency when it comes to lobbying, which has been a huge challenge in our city. And I'm also, I got to big up you, really proud of the work that you did with Councilman Burnett around campaign finance reform.
And thank you for signing on.
Yep.
One of the first people to do so.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge issue. People need to feel respected. And so, you know, I fundamentally believe that you do the work, you do a good job, and then you figure it out. And so for me, where I fit, I'm still figuring it out. I've got a very young family. I have a beautiful little 1-year-old baby who runs me around the house at all hours.
Ivan knows about that one.
Yeah.
Mine's 3, so I got out of that.
That's a whole other full-time job. I have an incredible wife who's a physician. And so I know that my name will be on the ballot in 2020. Where it is, I'm not sure yet.
So what I heard was young people will run your campaign. Transparency will be a part of your mayoral campaign, and you'll have a vision to rebuild Baltimore. And that's what I'm just taking from all that stuff. So y'all heard it right here first.
And if you need any, if you have any political needs or political management needs, may we suggest our fine sponsors, Politicom Strategic Solutions, for all your campaign needs. All right,
Councilmember, if I could take it out to maybe 10,000 feet, and I mean, obviously, people are very interested in you and in running for higher office, and I think that you'll make that determination when it's time. But can you speak a little bit about the need for, I just feel as though in this era of Trump and in this city that just went through 2 years ago, really what I consider a pretty divisive mayoral campaign, like there were like Catherine people and Sheila people and Trump, people and Trump hating people. And you are a councilman who, quiet as it's kept, represents the only district in the entire city that voted for Larry Hogan over Ben Jealous. The first councilmanic district. You wouldn't know it given your progressive record, but you really have been a councilman that's managed to bring people together. You are a staunch progressive. You supported the $15 minimum wage. You've been on the forefront of additional resources for the social safety net and for the educational system, but yet you represent a district, the only councilmanic district, that voted for Larry Hogan over Ben Jealous. So what that says to me about you is that there's a kind of a bridge building component involved in what you do, kind of staying true to your values. But, for instance, you're a staunch supporter of the $15 minimum wage, but you do things like buy local, an initiative that's aimed at helping a lot of those businesses that might feel targeted by a policy like a $15 minimum wage. So can you talk a little bit about, irrespective of what you decide to do, the need for the political discourse, the local political discourse in this city to really come together in a way that I don't think we've seen in a long time. My dream is that whoever the next mayor is, whether it's Catherine again, whether it's you, whether it's anyone, is that they are elected because there's an overarching unifying vision that they present to the people of Baltimore, and Baltimore gets behind.
You sound like his spokesman. That's your next spokesman.
Are you his campaign manager, Mark?
No. I'm asking Zeke to talk, Councilmember, to talk a little bit about his vision in terms of unifying the city. We're so bitterly divided between East and West and North and South, and Sheila and Catherine, and how do we? What are your thoughts on kind of bringing the city together?
Yeah, no, I think that's a profound point, Mark, that we are a deeply divided city right now. It's race, it's class, it's how we think about safety, it's how we think about health, it's our schools. It's what you said, a very challenged discourse where folks want to get on social media and light someone up. We see that all the time.
Terrible.
Wonder where that comes from, Mark.
But, look, I think to your point, this is a moment where we need to be unified, where we need to put aside our differences, where we need to really invest in each other, invest in that civic capacity that makes our city great. One of the things I love about Baltimore is there is so much energy. I mean, you can feel it, right? When you go out there and you see No Boundaries and Out for Justice and Build and all these groups that are demanding better from the business community, from political folks, when you see people out on the streets, when you see the ACLU and the Jews United for Justice and the Housing Roundtable folks who got a huge win this last year with the actually funding our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the United Workers, there is just a civic pulse in this city. And frankly, the politicians need to catch up. We need to be there with people. One of the things I'm really proud of that Councilman Burnett, Councilwoman Sneed, and myself started is this program, Baltimore Rising, where we're attempting to cultivate civic leadership among rising leaders in our city. And that can be folks who are in college, that could be young people who are in high school, that could be senior citizens, that could be people in any part of their career. But it's about learning about Baltimore. It's about working together for better. And I do think it has to be about unity. Quick story I would tell related to what you said, Mark, on the $15 minimum wage and the business community. So you're absolutely right. I represent the only district in Baltimore that 2 times voted for Larry Hogan for governor.
Yeah.
Yep. I did not. Hassan did. However, when I was first running, I think I was the only council member that actually had to run a general election campaign against a Republican. No disrespect to my green people out there, because I know y'all worked extremely hard. But I had a guy, Mr. McDaniel, good young guy, really believes in Baltimore, very different vision from my own. But I'll never forget us going to a small business debate. And it was in Fells Point. I was in one of my favorite establishments, I won't say which one, in Fells Point, and it was about 30 different merchants from that community. And the one question for the entire small business debate was, will you support a $15 minimum wage?
Damn.
That was it. And my opponent, Mr. McDaniel, gets up there and he says, no, this is terrible. This is going to destroy Baltimore. We can't afford this. And they go nuts. I mean, they're cheering and clapping and crying, and the free nachos are coming out. The beer is being spilled all over the place. It's like pandemonium. And then they get up and they ask me, okay, Zeke, will you support a $15 minimum wage? And I said yes. And they called me everything but a child of God in that room. I will never forget it. And what I said is, we can't afford not to do a $15 minimum wage in Baltimore. And I base it in my own experience as a teacher, where I would see these parents who were working not 1, but 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. The folks who are coming out of incarceration. If we don't want them to reoffend, if we don't want to see the crime rate continue to skyrocket, people need a living wage. Yeah. They need affordable housing, and they need a decent living wage, and they need somewhere great and safe to send their kids. And that's what I said. I told the story of a mom at this debate, and they booed me out of there. And for about the next half a year, I couldn't walk around in Fells Point because folks hated me so much. However, if you talk to those same people today, they will tell you that I have consistently shown up for them. Whether or not we agree on the wage, we have shown up in Fells Point. We supported getting a business improvement district down there. So if you go shop in Fells Point, it's never looked cleaner. It's never been safer. You've got these guys that are, some of them returning citizens, that are out there making it beautiful. The small shop local challenge that actually came out of some of the same merchants that booed me down at this debate, that reached out for my support on this initiative. And it's been a two-way street, because they've hired young people when I've asked them to. They've really stepped up for me. And so I think we are in this moment, and again, it's not just Baltimore, where I think we are so deeply polarized, and we've got to figure out how to be able to talk to each other and how to show up for each other.
Speaking of showing up for each other, who would you show up for to run for council in the first district when you run for mayor in 2020?
Oh, jeez.
So again, we're not, look, one thing about the
hypothetically. Yeah.
One thing about the first district is that it is not short on talent.
You got that right.
Very engaged community, a lot of great people. I would just mention some of the folks that actually ran against me the first time, who I have enormous respect for. Mr. Goldman, who's a military veteran and who, Harvard lawyer, brilliant guy, works extremely hard. Mark Edelson, again, an attorney who has just done an enormous amount of good work as the president of the Canton Community Association. Mark Parker, who's a pastor of the church down there in Highlandtown and was one of my opponents, loves this city. And he started a preschool out of his church. Just amazing, amazing person. Ed Marcinko, who's a police officer, spent his career in law enforcement and ran a really good, sort of very locally based campaign. I know that folks are excited about Paris down there. She tore it up for Ben Jealous and has been just very active in the Central Committee. Look, I think we have some great people, and if I didn't name anyone, I'm sorry, but the first district is not short on talent, and I think regardless of who the council person is, will be extremely well represented.
So, hypothetically, if you ran for mayor, who would be your choice for council president as a candidate that's running as a
Hassan, man.
Hypothetically,
It's my last time on DMV Daily. Again, we have such a talented group in this council. I just fundamentally believe when I came in 2016 with 7 other new members, I just thought it was so exciting to get to be around those people. And I got to say, some of the folks who've been in the council too. My mentor, Mary Pat Clark, who through thick and thin has been a leader in this city, and just someone who always stands up. But there is no shortage of talent. I'm not gonna name names, but whoever it is, including, look, I gotta give props to Council President Young, who I think the youth fund is a big deal. I think it's gone a little bit under the radar, and there are still some challenges in terms of how it gets administered. But I think coming out of 2015, when we had an uprising, a lot of folks said, we need to invest in these young people. We need to do this and we need to do that. You had a lot of the businesses and foundations and government. There was the whole One Baltimore thing.
And millions of dollars went missing somehow.
It all petered out. And to be fair, I think that to President Young's credit, the youth fund has sustained. And he had to override the former mayor's veto on that. I remember, because at that time I was the executive director of the intersection, and my students were out there rallying and pushing and saying, we need this investment in us. So
I remember I wrote about that.
You wrote it. Yeah, that brings me back. So there is no shortage of talent, but I do think that this city is crying out for some really strong leadership, and not just leadership that makes it about me. Because one thing that I've learned on city council is that it's actually not about me. It's about my community. It's about the people that I'm doing the work with. It's about my colleagues. It's about the folks in the city agencies who we both need to hold accountable, but also support when they do a good job. I think there's just like a thirst in this city for collaborative, forward-thinking, progressive leadership.
Councilman, I definitely thank you for your support on the Fight for 15. We know that we have the legislative session coming up, and there's going to be a statewide push for that. Will you go up there and testify at some of the committee hearings?
Absolutely. I will be in Annapolis this year for that. Certainly for schools. Again, disappointed that they're not going to take up Kerwin, but I want to make sure they know that we in Baltimore need funding for our schools. But yeah, I think
who makes up these forms? I mean, and I'm gonna be honest with you, because again, I understand fully. The only thing that this state constitution requires is to pass the budget and to adequately fund K through 12 education. Everything else is child. You don't have to do none of that per the Constitution. But when you're talking about billion, I mean, and this Kerwin recommendation is billions a year.
Yeah.
How do you pay for that?
Yeah.
Where is it going to come from?
Yep.
That's all I want to know. Where's it? Because we pour millions and billions of dollars down the drain, it seems like, in Baltimore City. And look at the damn conditions that our kids have to consider. And this administration, I'm sorry, seems to be against charter schools. My sons always went to charter school.
Yeah, my grandbabies too.
I love charter schools if they're done right,
Mm-hmm.
not just for anybody.
I think Monarch Academy is a great school, and they're looking at closing it.
But so how do you balance
I don't
that?
think anyone's against charter schools.
Oh no, the Santa Lisa. She specifically said out of her mouth multiple times that she was not a fan of charter schools. Matter of fact, she just said it in the
Stokes. They take away public dollars into private.
Okay, but they're still doing a service for our children. I don't give a damn who it's going. The money's going to public school. If you can't educate my child correctly, but this charter school can, shit, give them the money to them. I don't give a damn. Long as my child gets educated, they're worried about. So they can get all of the money, and then they end up fucking the money up every chance they get.
Hassan, I've seen the differences because my son went to Baybrook Elementary, which I think was just a horrible school. My grandbaby goes to Monarch Academy, and I mean she's one of the brightest stars that I've seen in our family in a long time. But that's because of the work that they do at that school.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah, and look, on charter schools, I think, I fundamentally believe that innovation is good, that we should be challenging ourselves to think outside the box. I do think Maryland gets it right, which is that our charters are unionized, right? I want to make sure our teachers are getting paid commensurate with the work that they do. When I look at places like Texas or Florida, them charter schools are off the hook. I mean, there's no accountability. Teachers are drastically underpaid. They're not valued. I mean, there's literally some that are just like workshops where you sit a bunch of kids in front of a laptop and some for-profit company is making a bunch of money. Right. So I think absolutely charter schools should be unionized. I think there's questions that need to be wrestled with around what does equity look like in terms of how they get funded and how they don't get funded. But I think, and again, we've got some really good charters in this school, in this city. We've got some really good, and I'm glad to hear your granddaughter had a great experience with Monarch, and I'm sorry that it's closing.
It's scheduled to be one of the schools to close.
Yep. We've got some great charters, and we've got some great traditional schools. I got to big up Hampstead Hill Academy, which was one of the 5-star schools in the state. In my district, Wolf Street Academy, that went from being, I want to say, the 76th ranked school in the city to the second best after 6 years of becoming a community school with a phenomenal principal and a staff of teachers and parents that just rallied around them and have made it great. John Rura, just down the road in Greektown, where I'm going tonight. Look, we have some great schools in this city, and I don't like when people talk about city schools as if it's like a monolith, because the reality is that there are some excellent things happening within our school system. They're just not enough of them. And there's not enough full accountability for the educational experience of kids.
Man, you sound like a mayoral candidate to me. I'd vote for your ass if you ask me right now. So keep us in tune. I know you said you'll never come back, but I hope that was just in jest.
In jest.
Because we're going to keep bringing you back over and over and over again. But it's time for us to wrap it up. So, as always, we want to thank you, Councilman Zeke Cohen, for joining us. Definitely a pleasure. And to the listeners, Happy New Year. for my all guests, remember, new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.
Free Keith Davis.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.